Welcome to the show, Mark Kelly.
Yes, hey, Vinny, it's good to be here.
I can't believe it. I'm really excited to have you on the show. I'm looking forward to the event at the Lyman Center. Talking about you all week and how I had wished I got a chance to have a one-on-one with you. I never heard from anyone in your office, so I'm glad that it's happened. And then I saw the article in the New Haven Register, the chat you had with Joe Amaranti, who's a colleague, good guy, and it's a great interview. But I am curious about one thing. Before I ask you, exactly what it is you'll do when you speak, I do have a question for you that if you don't want to answer, feel free not to. But I've been reading up on you all year. It's an incredible thing. Your wife and yourself have endured the focus on courage and hope and all that. But I'm curious as to justice here. I never read an update in any of the stories. The guy who did this horrible thing, an 8-year-old. Has anyone asked you, sir, at any point what you would like to see happen to Jared Loughner and what is happening with Jared Loughner? Or is that something you're like, I don't want to focus on that?
I have been asked that, but not very frequently.
Yeah, why is that, do you think, sir?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, people don't like to focus so much on the negative, but it's something that Gabby and I don't talk about much either. I mean, we've discussed it a number of times. She doesn't dwell on it. We get updates from the U.S. Attorney's Office as to his case. He's currently in a psychiatric hospital in Missouri, and when he's on medication, and the whole court case revolves around whether he's going to be medicated or not. Ironically, his defense team tries to keep him off the antipsychotic medication.
I read that. Yeah, I had read that at one point.
And the U.S. Attorney Office wants to restore him to competency so he can stand trial, and that's what all the victims and the families would like. But until they get to the point where he's competent, he's not going to stand trial. That could, one of the reasons why we don't spend too much time thinking about it is because it could be a year, it could be forever.
Yeah.
So there's really no point in dwelling on it.
Probably the latter, too. And certainly as far as your wife is concerned, I can see it impeding her, her therapy, and you can't let her mind wander there. But as a husband, I wondered if you've been this, maybe you didn't even like it. The media has certainly served the loving, doting, as you are, husband who went into space after all of this. And maybe they knew. I wondered aloud, actually, sir, if they thought, well, if we ask him what he would like to see done to this guy, this horrible creature, they might see a glint in Mark Kelly's eye. Oh, you know what I'd like to see done? Maybe they didn't want the world to see you that way.
I've even asked Gabby, too. We actually talk about that in our book. One of the chapters, it was very early on when she was really struggling with speech. And it was interesting how, Gabby, who had a very difficult time speaking at the time, was able to sum up what she, her thoughts about, the subject of him in just one syllable, which was R-O-T, rot.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was
absolutely
pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I know we need to focus on what you're doing here and the uplifting aspects of it. Connecticut here, we just repealed the death penalty. I think this is a reason why we shouldn't be repealing it. I mean, you don't need to weigh in on such thoughts, but I know California's next as far as that's concerned. And I just think I think justice is running through our fingers, through the nation's, like sand through a fist. That's my take.
Yeah. Well, and it's, we're talking about it now. It's probably the amount of time we spent on it now is probably more than all the time Gabby and I would spend on the subject in months.
Yeah.
But she's very, she's focused on her recovery, and someday, getting back to public service. She's just very positive and in a good mood generally.
That's great. Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to getting out there to New Haven to speak to the community at.
Is it rough
Southern
for you?
Connecticut.
I mean, I remember the first time for an astronaut or a guy like yourself. Do you find yourself in this curious position of, wow, the spotlight's on me, I got a microphone in hand? That's got to be tough, walking around a stage. Do you walk around?
Yeah, I don't stand behind a podium.
You don't?
No, I kind of wander around. But just as a somebody who's been at NASA for 16 years, we've right from the beginning, you spent a lot of time speaking and engaging with the public, so it's not something new for me.
Right. Is there a Q&A portion, Mark?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. I have to look at some of, often I will do, Q&A. I like to do that.
Do you get a fair amount of questions on the space program or what's left of it, or is it all focused on...
For me, I guess it's probably about 50-50.
Is it?
Yeah.
I get a lot of emails here doing talk radio, and again, we're on with Mark Kelly. A lot of listeners, kind of ticked off with what's happening with the space program these days, or what's not happening, more importantly.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I often tell, groups, especially when they're ticked off, is, I really, truly believe that we have exactly the space program that we deserve. If the public wanted something that was more robust and more money towards it, as a group, right? If this country wanted more, we would have more. I mean, members of Congress are generally very responsive to their constituents. It's interesting. Gabby was the chairwoman of the Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee during this whole thing called the Augustine Commission, which is where we were deciding which direction to go with our space program. Very controversial within the space community. We were going to cancel the current program we had, Constellation, after the retirement of the space shuttle, and possibly do this commercial crew thing. She was the chairwoman of the committee. Do you know how many contacts she would get each week regarding the space program?
I can't even hazard a guess.
Yeah, so these are letters and phone calls.
Okay.
She's the chairwoman of the committee. How many? So you don't want to guess? Let me tell you, you can sum it up on one hand.
I figured you were going to go there. Really? So why are people... This is something that comes up quite often on my show, too, sir, is that... for all the people who call into shows and angry about this and angry about that, do they do anything about it?
Well, a lot of them do. She would get contacted, all the time, thousands of phone calls and letters on things like health care and, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and Social Security and border security. Those things, and they should be. They're really important to people. The space program right now, not so important to, your average person. There's this constituency that are really care about it. When people think about it, it's something they're excited about. So I encourage them, all your listeners out there, to get engaged because, I've been married to a member of Congress for a long time. She's not in Congress anymore, but I know she is very responsive to her constituents. And I know other members of Congress are too. It's amazing the power that a single person has by just picking up the phone and calling their office.
This is going to be an incredible evening at the Lyman Center, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I don't want to be the downer interview, and I may have already been, Mark. But one other thing I did want to touch upon with you, with everything, I mean, you're outside of what happened that kind of catapulted you into the media spotlight, and then you literally catapulted into space, all this. You and I have something somewhat in common. I'm coming up on the 5-year anniversary of the passing of my mother. It incapacitated me for, I would say this 5th year is the first year I'm kind of not a mess. And I know that you just lost your mother. I believe I read with Joe Amaranti, and my condolences there, sir. And do you allow yourself that moment of, all right, enough, where you kind of look up into the heavens and say, enough already?
Yeah, sure.
It's the worst thing that ever happened.
Yeah.
I'm a mama's boy. I don't know if you were. It's the worst thing that ever happened to me, and healing has been
it's been a tough couple years in our family, but you gotta move on and focus on the positive.
Yeah.
And I often, my mother smoked cigarettes for 50 years.
Yeah.
So now I've become also a part-time anti-smoking advocate every time I see somebody, and it's not a good way to go.
No.
It's it was not a good last 3 or 4 months for my mom.
Yeah. It's just I just read that and I thought, wow, I realized on my 5th year, okay, I'm finally coming out of the haze. I don't know how you compartmentalize it. Okay, I can't think about that right now. Particularly when you were out in space this past year, you must have. How did you even navigate that? And I mean, figuratively, did you just say, "This is what I've got to think about"? My mind, my headspace can't be down on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, not only my life, but my other crew members' lives.
Sure.
And this mission depended that I remain focused. So, it's something we get to practice a lot in the military, flying airplanes off an aircraft carrier, flying in combat. I did that during during Operation Desert Storm. So over time, you develop this ability to do exactly what you said, compartmentalize. I mean, that's the term we use.
It is, okay.
And when Gabby was when I was in space, Gabby actually had her final brain surgery to replace the piece of skull that was removed on January 8th of last year, the day she was shot. So I talk about these things in my my discussion out there.
How long are you on stage about, sir?
I'll speak for whatever the group wants, 45 minutes to an hour, do Q&A for a portion of that if they would like.
I think it's fantastic. Mousetronaut, a partially true story, looks like a blast, a children's book you have coming out in the fall. I'd love to see astronaut become front and center. I recently read an article. When I was a kid, that was the top three. You wanted to be, astronaut was in there, president of the United States was in there, and baseball player, I recall. Now it's rapper, basketball player, and I think agent. I think the third one was agent. Go figure.
Like agent, like secret agent?
Not even, sir. Agent like Ari Gold from Entourage. Like, yeah. How do you like that one? So
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to be an astronaut or a baseball player.
There it is.
I wanted to be the shortstop for the New York Yankees, but Derek Jeter.
Yeah.
He had the same idea.
Yeah. So so who was it for you? Would it have been Bucky Dent? Was that?
Oh yeah, when I was a kid.
Yeah,
Bucky Dent.
That's it. Same as me.
Thurman Munson.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the season. Come on, I knew we would have that in common.
No, actually, Thurman Munson was the catcher. Greg Nettles was on third base.
Sure. Oh, I didn't hear you say the third base sign. Yeah. This is just going to be a powerful evening, and it sounds like it could be a very fun evening as well. I'm encouraging people. I'll be there. I hope I get a chance to meet you. We'll be setting up shop right by the entrance to the venue from 5:30 to 7:30. I'd love to shake your hand, sir, and meet you, and I appreciate you calling in.
Great. I look forward to meeting you there, Vinny, and I'm looking forward to getting up to Connecticut.
That's great. Mark Kelly, thanks for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All
Have
right.
a good day.
Bye-bye.